The Centurion Project. Written by the 8th Day of Night. Chapter 11. Lessons in Recovery. When Elias woke up, he found himself alone. It was to be expected, though, and while he found that he enjoyed having ponies around him for a night, he didn't want to make a habit of it. If he was going to have friends, he would have to push himself even harder now. He had to make sure they were safe. Even in a world that seemed naturally inclined to harmony rather than conflict, the only way to do that was to remain on edge. Elias felt the voices in his head again, but this time they worked together. The voice at the back laid plans to make sure he kept his friends nice and close, while the voice at the center began brainstorming about the worst things that could happen. The more terrible the scenarios he thought about, the more he could prepare for them. With his mind working at full steam, Elias rolled over. A tall stack of books sat on the nightside beside his bed. On top of it was all his sword and belt and a small folded piece of paper. Wincing slightly as he stretched his arm, he snatched the note from atop his sword belt and read it. See you after shift. Make sure you get plenty of rest. Love, Flash and Binder. Elias snorted softly at the love, but carefully refolded the piece of paper, tucking it on a pouch on his belt, and then rifled through his pockets for his watch, clicking it open to check the time. It was midnight, 6.5 hours until they visited. As he replaced the watch on his belt, Elias thought about what he should do with the time. He leaned back against the pillows and stared at the wall as he let his mind wander. What he couldn't do was to get up and train. He had no idea what treatment they were giving him, but he still felt weakness in his arms and legs, along with a myriad of associated aches and pains that wouldn't let him stand for long, let alone sling pila and swing a sword. The books were an option, but Elias found that he didn't have any particular interest to read at the moment, as he lacked writing materials. He just couldn't make a list about his intentions for the future. Elias frowned as he stared at the wall. Red? Elias blinked and looked to his side. Bookbinder and Nightflash were both staring at him with looks of concern. Elias blinked again and looked at the window where sunlight was filtering through. Elias looked back to the pony's confusion. What time is it? He asked. It's almost 7:30, Nightflash responded cautiously. Are you alright? You were just kind of staring into nowhere for a minute there. Elias scratched his head, running his fingers through his hair. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just thinking, Elias said absently. Shaking his head to clear the cobwebs, Elias blinked for a third time, finally focusing on the vision of the pair of ponies. No master in small talk, Elias asked. So, how was work? Nightflash and Bookbinder exchanged glances, and then they both shrugged. Nightflash nimbly hopped onto the bed and settled on Elias's right, his muzzle resting on Elias's stomach. Bookbinder set her saddlebags down and took a seat to his left as she started to talk. It was pretty much the same as usual for me. Light combat training, then a whole lot of catalog scrolls. I found you some more books, though. When we went to your room to clean of all the flu germs, I noticed that a little library you have in there. I noticed that a whole bunch of them were advanced editions, so I picked out better editions that didn't include all the theoreticals about magic. I don't know how you get some of those tomes, though. There were some rare ones in there. Did you pick them all yourself? No, Princess Celestia's protege did it for me, Elias said. A flash of fear raced through his mind. How thoroughly did you go through my room? He asked. If this is about the notebooks under your bed, don't worry. No pony even touched them. I had them in front of me long enough to use the purifying spell, and then went right back to under the mattress. Elias felt a breath that he didn't know he was holding escape his chest. He looked down, a trace of shame hitting him. Sorry, I shouldn't thought that you... He felt the hoof on his arm, and he looked up to Bookbinder's eyes gazing at him intently. Hey, don't feel bad about it. Every pony has something they don't want to talk about. You told Flash when you became friends that you wouldn't talk about it, and he told me the same rules. I don't know the reason behind those rules, and I don't really care about it. We're your friends, Elias. You can take all the time you need. We know that you'll open up when you feel ready,
If that day never comes, so be it. We'll be your friends anyway. Until you say otherwise, we will follow your rules as best as we can.
Elias pointedly looked at the Pegasus laying on his stomach. The bookbinder stuck her tongue out at him.
No physical contact is a silly rule. Hugging is like breathing for ponies. You're just gonna have to suck it up.
As she said this, she muzzled his hand. Elias wouldn't be beaten, however, and he began scratching her ears softly, just like he had done with a steel scalpel. The unicorn cooed softly, and unfortunately, she had another card left to play. She climbed onto the bed, laying at Elias' side with her head resting on his chest next to Night Flash's. As soon as she settled, she seized Elias' hand, pressing it harder against her head.
Oh, that's nice,
she said, her ears flicking as she pressed against him. She grabbed the hand and shoved it towards Night Flash.
You've got to try this, Flash. It's like he gets all the spots that always itch, but you can never reach.
Night Flash looked at Elias, who calmly used his secret weapon, a second arm. Returning to his left, the bookbinder, he also began scratching Night Flash behind the ears. The Pegasus had a much more noticeable reaction. He whimpered softly and his hind leg began thumping against the bed like a dog. He rubbed against Elias, his tail twitching in excitement. Flash's eyes sprang open and he grabbed Elias' hand, holding out in front of him. By Celestia, these are great! It's like a griffin hand, but without the talons. It gets everything. Night Flash smiled brightly at Elias. I know you probably won't get a cutie mark, Red, but if you did, you would definitely have one with ear scratching as your special talent. Bookbinder grunted softly.
I'll say, best ear scratch I've ever had.
Night Flash nodded in agreement and then settled again, letting Elias resume his ear scratching. Elias sighed as he leaned back, content to scratch the ponies for a moment. Bookbinder hummed happily, while Night Flash curled into a little ball. Elias made sure to file the moment, as well as the feeling he had in his chest, deep in the recesses of his mind. He would cherish it and use it as fuel. Careful to not let the mental tension spread to his hands, Elias combed through the scenarios the paranoid half of his mind had cooked up. Some he discarded out of hand as being too ludicrous, while others he kept to his side as likely situations. Each and every one would be looked over and prepared for the little ponies at his side. As all good things did, the moment soon ended. With one last rub against his arm, Bookbinder climbed down from the bed. Elias silently lamented the fact that the ponies were leaving, but he knew they couldn't, nor wouldn't, always be by his side. They likely had the lives outside the castle. Elias frowned when he realized that he didn't know anything about them or their outside lives. Night Flash rose as well, and Elias let his hand drop to allow the pony to climb down. He was pleasantly surprised when the Pegasus merely shifted sides, laying down against Elias's left side, his muzzle facing Bookbinder. The unicorn smiled at the two, then reached down to her saddlebags. Elias knew he didn't have nearly the same sense of smell as ponies, but he shared Flash's excitement when he smelled and then saw two compact dishes Bookbinder pulled from her bags. When it came from a tall cup, sealed at the top and filled with a particularly nasty-looking gray sludge, Elias watched in horror as the ponies got the food, while he got saddled with the sludge. He looked to Bookbinder. What is this? Why don't I get real food? He asked. Bookbinder opened her dish, revealing a steaming plate of hay fries. While Elias knew that he couldn't eat them, it didn't mean that his stomach didn't want to try. Maybe they were made of hay, but they smelled so good. Bookbinder smiled.
Because you are still sick. Until Dr. Scalpel clears your infliction and your flu, you have to eat these protein and vitamin shakes to keep your strength up. It's the exact same thing every pony gets when they get the pony flu as foals. I think yours is a bit more meat mixed in it if it makes you feel any better.
Elias looked at her suspiciously. He unscrewed the lid, opening a cup as he took a small sniff of the sludge. He recoiled in disgust. Come on, that's just on purpose, he said as he tried to ward away the smell. Night Flash smiled happily as he crunched away at a pair of tasty-looking tacos. It's not that bad, Red. We all did it. Elias felt his eye twitch as the Pegasus crunched the shell again. Just do it in one gulp. Elias held the cup to the pony's eyes. There is almost enough of a quart of this stuff. How am I going to get this down in one go? Night Flash stared at the sludge for a second, then shrugged as he bit into his taco again. Elias sighed as he eyed the cup, and then looked over to Bookbinder. Can I at least get a bucket just in case? Bookbinder stared him down, her plate of fries untouched. She was watching him intently, waiting for him to drink it. He imagined she would force him if he pressed the issue. She would try. With a look of disgust, Elias rescrewed the top and set it on the nightstand. Bookbinder frowned and immediately levitated back to his hands.
Elias, this is serious. If you want to get better, you need to drink this.
Elias crossed his arms and stared at her. I have eaten many things, some of which I'm not proud of. That, however, no, I will not.
Elias, you are making this much bigger problem than it needs to be.
I really don't think I am, Elias said. For Christ's sake, you could at least make it look more pleasant. Food dye, perhaps? Everything in Equestria seems to be either colorful or fuzzy. He curled his lip as he eyed the cup with disgust. This little drink of yours seems to be on the verge of the latter. I will not drink it. Low as they may be, I have standards. Nightflash sighed as his tacos were levitated away to rest on a bed with Bookbinder's fries. Elias carefully noted their location as he tensed up, ready to make his move. If they wanted to play, he felt more than game. Maybe he was still being affected by the flu, but he had a fair idea what was going to happen next, and he felt positively giddy about it. Bookbinder got out of her seat, her horn sending a sheet of paper away with a net flash of light.
Elias, you will drink your medicine. This is not up for debate.
Elias grinned at her. You'd be surprised how untrue both of those statements are. With a flash of motion, Elias threw his blanket over Nightflash as he slipped from the right side of the bed. He took the cup with him as he rolled, hitting the floor with a grunt. He then got to his feet, ducking around the bed as he made for the door. As he expected, Elias found himself lifted in Bookbinder's magical aura, so he responded by throwing it across the room. This left the unicorn with a decision. Keep him suspended, but lose the medicine, therefore avoiding the point of the exercise, or she dropped Elias, allowing him a chance to escape, while catching the cup and its foul contents. She chose the latter with a loud gasp. Elias hit the floor and immediately bolted towards the door, only stopping to snatch a blanket off one of the beds. He was naked again, and he had enough dignity to not run back to his room without some sort of covering. He hit the infirmary doors at a run, wrapping the blanket around his waist as he bolted left. It was the roundabout way, but it might buy him time to lose the pair of ponies before he hid in the safety of his own quarters. Just as he turned the corner, he heard the infirmary door slam open.
Elias, you get back here. You are sick and you need to rest and take your medicine. I promise that if you drink it all, we'll give you extra hugs before we leave.
A part of mind was tempted to turn back, but Elias knew better than any, even a portion of his mind, that hugs were bad. They had already made him too soft, and running would be the only solution to stay out of their fuzzy clutches. That and the cup looked horrifying. He wanted no part of what was inside. Trying to remain as silent as possible, Elias crept along the carpeted floors, his footfalls silent compared to the average pony. It helped that he was also lighter than normal. Footfalls quickly began to echo behind him, so Elias picked up the pace, trying his best to remain quiet. His body wasn't going to last at a dead sprint, so stealth was his only option. He neared to the next corner, just as Bookbinder came around.
You!
She shouted, pointing a hoof at him. Elias bolted immediately. He heard the unicorn give chase, likely trying to get in range to levitate him again.
Elias, you get back here this instant!
She called. What is wrong with you people? He shouted over his shoulder. What happened to the soup when you got sick? He gripped the corner of his fingers and swung himself around. He spotted a door an arm lengths away, so Elias seized the handle and quickly flung the door open. Dipping inside, he closed it behind him just as quickly. He made sure to let the door jamb slip close quietly, as to hopefully throw Bookbinder off his tracks. The room was pitch black, and as soon as the door closed, Elias held the handle with both hands. If she tried to open it, he would imitate a lock, keeping it securely closed. With hope, he would pick a different door in the hallway so that he could slip out and back into the infirmary. Then the tacos would be his. After that, he would slip out again and hide in his room, bolting to the door so he could rest in peace, without fear of sludge drinks. In one ear, Elias listened to the sound of hoofsteps approaching the outside of the door. In the other, Elias realized he heard rustling. He bit his tongue and looked over his shoulder. A pair of green eyes stared sleepily back.
Who is there?
A familiar yet groggy voice asked. Elias winced. She was being far too loud. Would you believe me if I said nobody? He whispered back. Just a note. Give me a minute, and I won't be here at all. Luna sat up, rubbing at her eyes.
Ah, Guardsman Bright. It is only you. It is a surprise, though not necessarily an unwelcome one. Might I ask why you are in my quarters at this hour?
She paused for a moment.
And why are you naked?
As Elias' eyes adjusted, he could very clearly see that, yes, these were indeed Luna's quarters. He had caught a glance inside one while on guard duty. Due to the darkness, he couldn't really see any significant details, but the fact that the princess was sleeping in the room was more than proof enough. The hoofsteps in the hallway had slowed down slightly. Elias prayed that Luna would stop asking questions. Just trying to avoid being poisoned by friends, you know how it is. He hissed at Luna. As for the naked, they keep taking my clothes in the infirmary. I know ponies don't need clothing, but I do, and I really got to talk to Dr. Scalpel about not stripping me down every time. I'm admitted. The hoofsteps stopped in front of the door. He could hear Bookbinder muttering to herself. Likely she recognized the door, but she didn't try the handle. Elias listened carefully as the steps retreated, moving further down the hall. Excellent. A few more seconds, and then he could bolt. Unfortunately, Luna got out of her bed, and the lights flicked on. The princess smirked as she beheld the sight that was a sickly Elias, clutching a door handle, while half naked. Elias imagined he too would laugh if the roles were reversed.
This is excellent news, Elias,
Luna said.
Making new friends is a wonderful thing, especially two of those who care about you so much.
Elias didn't like that tone in her voice. She was mocking him, biding her time. Elias didn't want to find out what she was planning. He listened to a door open in the hallway. A few seconds more.
Unfortunately, Guardsman, Dr. Scalpel thought this might happen, and as such, he has delivered contingencies to every pony around the infirmary.
Elias watched in horror as she produced a full crate of the awful-looking sludge from underneath her bed, all packed away into quart-sized jugs. Elias looked at Luna, who was smiling widely. He ripped open the door and swiftly darted out. What is wrong with all you? He shouted as he bolted again. Now with two ponies hot on his trail as Bookbinder gave a cry of victory as she began to pursue him once more. I can't be this important! He rocketed around the corner again, his time almost tripping on the carpet as he slid. Hitting the wall, he pushed off and ran the opposite way, quickly flying past the hallway leading to the infirmary. Luna and Bookbinder took the corner much better than he did and set off in hot pursuit. Elias was losing ground. He knew it. They were in much better shape than he was, and there were two of them now. Well, make that three. Nightflash poked his head out around the corner ahead of Elias, smiling widely as he blocked the path. Elias had one card to play in this situation. While it wouldn't hurt later, it would make miles better than drinking that foul liquid. Nightflash, if you don't block me, I'll give you a hug later. No complaints, Elias shouted. The Pegasus perked up, his grin widening. Really? He asked, his tail wagging. Elias glanced over his shoulder. The two mares were getting closer. Yep, anytime. No questions asked. Nightflash flapped into the air with excitement as he cheered. Elias ducked under the Pegasus and sprinted onward. As he began making his getaway, Bookbinder slowed to scold Nightflash.
Flash, we can't always take hugs from Elias. That's what friends do.
Nightflash smiled sheepishly. But, Bindy, a free hug given always feels better. Elias grinned as he saw a window ahead. The infirmary should be on the first floor, so if he jumped, he could disappear into the gardens. With no linear hallway to trap him, he could hide without limit. They'd give up eventually, or at least he hoped. Elias quickly undid the latch and flung the window open, hoping the ledge was as he looked down. His eyes widened and his grip on the wall tightened when he realized the window opened, not to the gardens, but to the edge of several thousand-foot drop that made up Canterlot Mountain. Elias quickly realized that he had made a tactical error, and that it was made more clear when he looked back to find a pony already closing in. Luna grinned savagely at him.
No more running, Guardsman. The chase has been most exciting, but it is over. Surrender yourself that we may help you get better.
Elias looked between her and the pool of water at the bottom. Technically speaking, He had done this kind of thing before, although the last time it almost killed him. Elias weighed the option in his mind. As he took time to think, Bookbinder and Nightflash caught up, and Bookbinder smiled.
Oh, cool. Thanks, Princess. That drop is huge. You'll never jump from that height.
Elias' eyes narrowed as he glared at the unicorn. I should jump just to prove I can. Bookbinder scoffed.
Don't be silly, Elias. Running is one thing, and admittedly a lot of fun, but that's actually dangerous, and we don't want you getting hurt.
Elias spotted the cup of sludge carefully hidden behind her back. His mind was made up. He smiled, gave them a two-fingered salute, then leaned backward out the window. He didn't even fall a foot before he was wrapped in blue magic. Elias mentally cursed himself. He forgot they could do that. As he was pulled back into the window, Elias at least had the dignity not to squirm. Luna was still smiling, while Bookbinder and Nightflash were not. As soon as Luna set him on the ground, Bookbinder jumped on him, pinning him to the ground as she smacked the back of his head.
Really?
She shrieked in his face.
You would rather die than take some icky medicine.
Elias smiled slightly. The motion seemed to make the unicorn angrier, so he dropped it. There was water at the bottom. I thought I could make it, he said meekly. She smacked him again. The second time it actually hurt. Bookbinder got right in his face, and Elias noticed the tears at the bottom of her eyes as she yelled at him.
This isn't funny, Elias. You could have gotten seriously hurt.
She whimpered softly as she looked away.
I thought you were jumping so we wouldn't have to be your friends anymore. I was so scared for you.
Elias blinked in surprise. This wasn't just friendly concern. He had actually scared her by jumping. Mental clarity seemed to finally reach the man, and he blinked as he looked at the still open window he had had leapt out of. The true stupidity of his decision, as well as how it must have looked, struck him, and a horrible feeling began to spread through his brain. He sighed and pulled the pony close, wrapping her in a light hug. Hey, now, I wasn't running from you, I thought this would be fun. I still want to be friends with you. She sniffed once.
I thought maybe I had gone too far. I broke your rules and
Elias shoved her softly. Shh. Bookbinder, don't worry about the rules. I just made a dumb decision is all. He chuckled slightly. I think I might be a little sick. She looked up with him with those big, tear-filled eyes, wiping her muzzle as she sniffed.
More than a little,
she said. Elias smiled. You're probably all right. Well, more than a little. I'm sorry, Bookbinder. I don't know what came over me. It won't happen again. She sniffed and nuzzled his bare chest, using her magic to pull his arms tighter around her.
Better not,
she mumbled. Elias felt his eyes fall on the cup for a moment. The smart man would realize that he still had an opportunity to be rid of the foul stuff. The window sat ready, and now the cup was in arm's reach. A single motion could send it flying. As he looked at the still satin pony in his arms, Elias sighed, grabbing the cup with one hand. He lightly poked Bookbinder in the side, and the pony looked up to his face, then to the cup, then back to his face. Her eyes became hopeful. I'll drink it on one condition, he said, putting the finger up. Bookbinder's tail wagged slightly.
What is it? I want to see you better, Elias, and I'll do a lot to see it happen.
Elias grimaced as he eyed the cup. The sludge inside seemed to mock him. He looked back to Bookbinder, who smiled enthusiastically. Elias sighed, the things he had to do to get by. Can I at least get some soup to wash it down? The drink was every bit as disgusting as it looked, but as agreed, the next one would come with tomato soup. Elias took a small bit of satisfaction in that win. The rest of the morning was spent chatting away about nothing, with Nightflash and Bookbinder rotating who sat in the bed with Elias and who occasionally sat in the chair, telling a story or occasionally even reading a book from the stack of books in his nightstand. Throughout it all, while he did enjoy the company, a thought gnawed at the back of his mind. Why have Bookbinder displayed such anger and grief when he jumped? They had known each other for maybe a day, and had shared less than 100 words with each other, yet she acted like he was a lifelong friend that she had made many significant memories with. It puzzled him, as she didn't seem nearly so outwardly innocent as Night Flash. The Pegasus was very clearly a forgive and forget kind of pony, but Binder didn't seem like that. She seemed much planned out, as if every action had significance, as opposed to Night Flash, who seemed to follow the flow from one place to another, happy with his situation as long as he had his friends. The Pegasus in question was sprawled across Eliza's lap. His wings splayed out as he snored and twitched in his sleep. Since the pair had the next day off, they had decided to make an extra long visit out of the morning. The result was 2 tired ponies, though Bookbinder actually stayed awake. She was simply laying against Eliza's side, smiling as Night Flash kicked in his sleep. Eliza scratched her ears softly. Hey, Bookbinder. Her head perked up and she looked at him.
Yes, Elias?
She asked curiously. Elias sighed as he thought about how best phrase the question. When nothing nice popped into his mind, he decided to say it as concisely as possible. Why are we friends? Bookbinder frowned, her eyes downcast.
Oh.
She sighed softly. She kneaded the mattress under her hooves.
If you don't want to be, I get it, and...
Elias booped her slightly on the nose, causing her to squeak in surprise. She looked back up at him with big eyes. That isn't what I asked, Elias said firmly. I just want to know why you beat yourself up so much when we haven't even known each other for that long. We've had a total of 3 conversations, yet here you are, taking care of me when I'm sick. I couldn't ask anyone to do this, yet you did it without being asked. I just want to know why. Bookbinder sniffed, then shrugged as she laid her head back down.
I don't know,
She replied.
It just feels like the right thing to do.
Elias snorted at the nondescriptive answer. But why me? He asked. Bookbinder pressed a bit closer.
For me, it's a couple reasons. First, despite what every pony might think or say, I don't think you're some sort of bad guy.
Elias opened his mouth to respond to that, but Bookbinder cut him off, not even bothering to turn around.
Not a word, mister. I don't care what happened in the past. Right now, you're a good guy, and I can see that clearly. And Night Flash can too. It's why we're both trying to care for you so much. It's plain for any pony to see that you've been hurt. I don't need to know why or how. I just know that it has happened. Now you're trying to do better. That's what matters to me. You looked after Night Flash, even though you had no reason to. You became a guard instead of whatever else the princesses offered you.
She pressed her muzzle to his side softly.
That's more than enough reason for me. Night Flash is only a little bit different, because he believes every pony deserves a friend, and so he tries to make friends with any pony who doesn't have one. It's the single best thing about him. He just tries so hard. It's why I love him.
She froze in horror as she uttered those words. Night Flash twitched softly, but he continued to smile as he remained asleep. Bookbinder whirled around, clawing up Elias's chest so that they were nose to nose.
You can't tell him I said that,
she whispered harshly.
He doesn't know yet.
Elias blinked. All right, he said slowly. But why doesn't he know? You two seem to get along well enough from what I've seen. Bookbinder's tail switched back and forth.
I know, it's just... I want him to come to me. Traditionally, the mare is supposed to approach the stallion, but Night Flash is different.
She whimpered softly and her eyes fell.
I don't want to scare him off, and I think that if I try to court him, he'll run away.
She sniffled.
Don't want to lose him.
Elias stroked her mane softly. This was kind of getting out of hand. He had no idea what to do, and this kind of love was like. Platonic love between friends? Sure, he had experienced some of that. Martial kind of love, though? Completely foreign. He's never had the time, nor the interest. Still, he tried reading one of those romance novels once upon a time, so some of those lines should work, right? Hey, that won't happen, he said, trying to sound as comforting as possible. Night Flash is a good guy, and I have no doubt that he shares your feelings, just... Elias struggled as he tried to think of the right thing to say. He mentally snapped his fingers as it came an idea to his head. Try to think of it like a minefield. Bookbinder tilted her head slightly.
A minefield? Why should I treat our potential love life like a minefield?
I didn't say that. Look, imagine it like this. Night Flash is on the other side of the minefield, and a serious relationship with you is on the other end. What you have to do is lead him carefully through the minefield by dropping hints and clues to lead him to the conclusion you want. Elias could see the metaphor rapidly disintegrate before his eyes. Bookbinder stared at him like he was stupid. Elias sighed in exasperation as he threw his hands up. I don't know. I'm not a love guy. Coming to me for advice about this kind of thing is about the worst place to ask. Bookbinder sniggled and rubbed against his side.
You're funny, Elias. Sometimes you seem like an old grizzled pony, like Princess Celestia. And yet other times you seem like a little baby. The way you have no idea what you're talking about is adorable.
Elias raised an eyebrow as he tried to cross his arms and his chest. Unfortunately, there was a pony smiling up at him. Care to rephrase that? He asked, trying to sound angry. Bookbinder stuck her tongue out at him, completely unconvinced.
Nope.
She chirped cheerfully. Bookbinder pressed his side as she stared at Night Flash.
Can you keep this a secret, though? I don't want him to get scared of me. I'd rather have a secret crush on him forever and still be friends than to have him know and never talk to me again.
She sniffled softly.
It would break my heart.
Elias nodded. Your secret's safe with me, Bookbinder. But I think you should tell him. The longer it sits, the more it will hurt. Trust me. I know. Bookbinder nodded in understanding.
Thanks, Elias. It means a lot.
She climbed off his chest, snuggling back into his side. This time, however, she put her head on Night Flash's belly, snorting softly into his fur. The Pegasus giggled in his sleep, rolling over so that his wings draped over Bookbinder's body. The unicorn cooed happily and closed her eyes. Elias shook his head as he watched the unicorn fall asleep. Watching the two sleeping ponies, he smiled, feeling a bit warmer inside. This was swiftly replaced by a cold feeling, and though he couldn't see him, Elias knew he was here. You know we have to do everything in our power to keep them safe, right? Other Elias whispered in his ear. Elias bit his cheek. Bit late for you to be cautioning me, he whispered. Weren't you the one who recommended this kind of decision? Of course I did, and it paid off in spades. But that doesn't mean we're not us. What we aren't physically more capable than these ponies. They might have weird powers, but we have the nerve and strength to do the job right. We know how the best to keep them safe for any price. Elias nodded for once in complete agreement with the Phantom. For any price, he whispered. There we go. Chapter 11. I almost actually started laughing at the Luna part. You could probably hear it in my voice. But aside from that, I hope you've enjoyed this reading. If you want to join my Discord to either talk or, leave some comments, I would appreciate it, and I'll also leave any links relevant down below in my description. This has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day.